going to talk about today is called the 4 Conversations. We found this material very practical in the workplace because as you guys work in teams, how's the communication going?
Do you ever have any communication problems?
Sure.
No.
Is there ever any misunderstandings?
No.
And then at other times, things may go pretty well, right? Okay. So this material is going to help you build some practices so that you can make those unsatisfying times a little bit better, and then recognize when things are going well. You can use this model to understand why they're going well. Okay. So at the very top there is exercise 1. So we're going to have you actually do some worksheet work here throughout the course so that we can use your actual experience as we explain some of the concepts. So here's the first exercise. Think about conversations you've had. Well, let's pull out some of those ingredients. What is it that he's initiating here? What would you say?
Program to get a man on the moon.
And back.
And back.
And back. That was the key. That was the and back. That was the tough part.
Okay. So that's the what. What about the when?
Within the decade.
Before the decade is out.
Where the decade is out. Okay. Why?
More impressive mankind, more important for the long-range exploration space, and then will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
Okay. So this is an example of a conversation to initiate something that includes those ingredients. And you can start to both hear that in your own words when you start to initiate something, and you can get feedback from others, whether or not you have all 3 ingredients.
Would anybody like to give us an example?
I laugh.
Margaret.
I was talking to 2 team members about a project I would like to see accomplished, and that was to get at least 1,000 more reports into a particular repository.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about who would do what parts in the project and how. And we talked about why that was important. But I never said when I would like to have it done.
Oh.
So when I got to part B, I was kind of like, well, I want it done by the end of the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I never said that.
Uh-huh.
And I just kind of assumed that everybody would get started and it would be running by now. But there were some technical questions to answer that haven't been answered yet.
So when you add the ingredient of the when, what does it actually create for folks?
A task.
A timeline, a task, right? Gives them some sense of where in the mix of the other stuff it's going to need to go, right? So they begin to start thinking about that. And in the absence of that, it may be difficult for them to place it within the context of other tasks and that sort of stuff. And it also kind of gives a sense of the volume of it, right? Because once you're given something and then the when is added, you kind of get a sense of how difficult it's going to be to get it done in that time frame or not, and it starts to get you moving towards thinking about accomplishing the actual work. Okay? So if you are not the initiator, but you're participating in it, you want to ask questions so that it becomes clear for you what it is your role is and what needs to be done, and who else might need to be involved.
Now, this is the kind of conversation where you start to actually lay out a schedule and a timeline. So we can understand, what is it going to take, how long is it going to take us to do that? Because in that process of understanding how long and who, you can start to find some problems, right? You can find some conflicts in schedules. You can find that, well, maybe it's really going to take us a lot longer than we had originally thought. So you're starting to get into some more details in this kind of a conversation.
Questions at this time? You have curiosities.
When you're talking about and you have an initiating conversation and you're in a group, okay, and everybody kind of gets it, except there's one person that doesn't. At what point do you move on? And how do you handle when that person just doesn't seem to get it? Like I attend meetings once a month where there's like 30 of us and there's always somebody that goes, but you have to move on because you've on.
Because you have to move on because it's a group of people?
It's a
Is
group
that-
of people and you had, 2 hours and you've got 10 topics to cover, but you know darn well that person just didn't get it about whatever topic it was.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're describing there is a different kind of understanding conversation needs to happen. So somebody's proposed something, someone just doesn't understand. What does it mean? And so that's when you have a couple choices. One is you can start to ask questions, these kind of questions, right? So help me understand what you need to, what you're unclear about, right? Is it who's going to do it? Is it how's it going to get done? Is it resources? And it could be there's a couple things that could be happening. For example, one could be they hear what people are saying about resources, for example, but they don't believe it. Right? They'd say, okay, you say we're going to get money to do that. I don't think that's going to happen. But you need to make that clear, right? Because sometimes questions are about a disagreement, and they're asking questions to disagree. Okay, that could be the case.
Yeah.
Now, in a group setting, that doesn't work, and you start to ask these questions and it's not clearing it up, it could be other things going on. For example, we'll get into this next, they could think you're really trying to make a commitment for everything, and you're not quite there yet. Okay? So one thing you could do is maybe move to the commitment portion of the performance conversation, which we'll get to next. You can move to that and see if that's where the disagreement is. Okay? The other thing you can do is if there really does need to be some more understanding conversation, is do it offline. Do it, one-on-one. Suggest maybe a couple people go meet later after the meeting and clear up the misunderstandings.
A good performance conversation has what we call 3 turns to it. There is a very specific request. So in this example, would you develop a draft of the report by next Friday? Okay, so that's a request to ask somebody what it is and then the when. The second turn in the conversation is an acknowledgement. It's either a yes or a no explicitly. In this case, yes, I'll have it on your desk by close of business on Thursday. And then the third turn is an acknowledgement that you heard the commitment. Thank you for taking this on. So we look for good performance conversations that essentially have those 3 turns in them. Okay?
So really think about this, for example, at the end of a meeting where you think people were supposed to go do something. Think about, did you hear these 3 turns in that meeting? Quite often what we find is people will break up from a meeting thinking somebody was going to go do something. And one of these ingredients was missing. Either there wasn't a clear request or there wasn't a clear promise to make it happen.
Now sometimes saying yes is easier than saying no. Well, why would that be?
Because then they'll go away.
If I say yes at this point in time, maybe they'll go away, right? And maybe they'll forget about it or whatever. Why else would it be easier to say yes than no?
You're uncomfortable saying no?
Why are you uncomfortable?
We want to please people. We want to make everyone happy.
Yes, you want to make everyone happy, so you want to be agreeable and you want to say yes. Even when perhaps you can't do it, which actually is going to make people what? Angry and unhappy, right? So you may actually get what you don't want by saying yes when it's not clear that you have the commitment to do it. See how we kind of get ourselves into those loops? Okay? Because up front we want to be agreeable, we want to look like we're service-oriented, and all of that. And there's ways to do that to make sure that you also can hold your commitments. Because if you're seen as a person that makes good agreements and holds them, then what are you known as? Reliable, dependable, you can deliver, right?
Trustworthy.
And people will come back to you. If you're known as a person who says yes to everything but doesn't quite get it done, what do you become known as? You may not be asked anymore.
Sure.
Right?
Which is what some people might want.
Well, whether it's what they want or not, it's probably what they're going to get.
Barbara, did you?
Yeah, I was going to say, I used to work for someone who would say, we should do this. And I'd go, that's a great idea. And I'd go back to my desk and I'd go, wait a minute.
What happened?
Did I just volunteer?
Was that an assignment or is it just something that we agreed would be a good idea?
Exactly. So there, so what was that? What was the, we should go do this?
It was, I didn't know. Was it a request or was it just an idea that
Exactly.
got
It's an
thrown out?
initiative conversation on the face value of it, right?
Right.
That's it. And if you took it just as that, it's, yeah, that's a good idea. Nothing else happens after that, and nothing will happen.
Right.
So then you can move it to a, perhaps, if somebody does that for you and says, we should go do this. You go, okay. So what exactly do you mean by that? Move to an understanding conversation. Who actually would do this?
Is
if
that
they were
we
to-
as in you or we as in
Yeah.
me?
Is that a royal we?
Because then you're exploring the who, which is part of the understanding, right? If you ask a question back around that. So you're moving the person to an understanding conversation, which is fine. Because the goal is to actually get an agreement or not on what needs to be done.
Absolutely. In fact, that's a really good point. It's often almost more important that non-supervisors, non-managers really take this stuff to heart. Because then you can all change the way, the tone, and the way everybody is working in the organization. Because you ask things of each other all the time, right? You need things from each other. You misunderstand each other all the time. So all of these things are important.
And it's really gonna help out too, with just having a reference conversation with patrons, to make sure that you understand
Very good.
the when, the why, the how. I mean, we're very good at, I think all of us on the reference staff, we know to ask questions and be thorough to understand what it is they're looking for, but we might not follow up with, did you, hopefully we do, we say, did you get everything you wanted in the timeline that you wanted it?
Mhm.
And that's something.
Now, are there times when you're making a request of a patron?
Yes, I just have that. I was at we couldn't find a document and he said, I have a point of contact at Geothermal, and I said, will you get that for me? Yes.
Uh-huh.
Did I say when? No. Did he get it to me?
No.
Did he apologize? Yes. Did we find it? Yeah, that's all that matters. So we're done, right? But there's no closure.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we're going to do a role play, and what we want you to do is listen for the conversation that we're doing at any moment. And what you'll notice is that it's moving around all the time. It isn't this linear flow between 1 and 4. Right? But it's whatever is happening at the moment calls forth a need for one of these conversations. Okay, did you see how it was, some of those were pretty subtle, right? They don't follow the formula exactly, and we were jumping around, right?
So what did you hear? What type of conversations?
Well, it was initiating and
It seemed like you went right from initiating to performance.
Okay.
You said, this is exactly what I want. Can you do that for me?
I think you went to closure next. Because you could apologize for what
What
happened in
happened.
the past.
Right, so I
Exactly.
You first of all said, let's get that out of the way.
Uh-huh.
So I actually made a request to begin with, right,
Right.
of performance, right? I said I want this by then, and then
Then I pulled in a past problem, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I asked for a closure conversation
Right.
by saying last time my inputs were ignored.
so we went through the 4 conversations, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see how it plays out that it isn't that way. So while we have 4 types of conversations, you're going to move between any of these conversations depending on how the flow is going, right? And part of the beauty of this, that in order to be able to flow between the different types of conversation, you're actually going to have to listen to each other to see what response is going to be most practical and pragmatic in that particular situation. If the past is brought up and you just keep moving on, pushing on the performance, right? So you bring up the past, and all I keep saying is, yeah, but can you have it to me by Friday? Right? That's not completing that past and acknowledging what the person actually said. So you're probably actually not going to create the relationship that you need to work with long term, and you're not actually going to get the work accomplished.